Title: My wife cheated on me with a taxi driver, Part 1. I never thought I'd be sharing my life here, but I need a place to vent and maybe find some clarity. My world's been turned upside down, and I'm still trying to piece together what happened. Let me start from the beginning. My wife, Sarah, and I have been married for 6 years. No kids, by choice, because we both wanted to focus on building our careers and enjoying life. We've had a good life, or so I thought. Things weren't perfect, but what marriage is. I always thought we'd make it through anything because we loved each other. Sarah works as a marketing consultant, which means she's constantly on the move, meeting clients, attending events, and working odd hours. For the past year or so, she started taking Ubers almost daily. At first, I didn't think much of it. It made sense. Her job required her to be in and out of meetings, and our car wasn't always available. She mentioned one driver, Alex, a few times, saying he was really nice and reliable. I even joked once, "Sounds like you've got a personal chauffeur." She laughed it off, but now I see how blind I was. Over the months, I noticed that her quick rides started turning into longer trips. She'd leave the house saying she had meetings, but sometimes she'd come back hours later with no real explanation. When I'd ask, she'd get defensive or say I was being paranoid. I chalked it up to stress from her job. Looking back, there were signs, but I ignored them. She started dressing up more, even for mundane errands. Her phone was glued to her hand, and she'd angle it away whenever I walked into the room. When I asked why she was suddenly so secretive, she'd blow up, accusing me of not trusting her. One night, we were having dinner, and she got a notification on her phone. She glanced at it, smiled, and then quickly put her phone face down on the table. I didn't say anything, but my stomach dropped. Something wasn't right. I started noticing that she was more distant, emotionally and physically. She stopped initiating sex, saying she was too tired or not in the mood. Again, I told myself it was just a phase, that work was taking its toll. But deep down, I was starting to feel like a stranger in my own marriage. And then there was the smell. She'd come home late sometimes, claiming she'd been at a work dinner, but she'd smell like cologne, not mine. I asked her about it once, and she laughed, saying, "Oh, that must be from hugging one of my co-workers." Her tone was so dismissive, so casual, that I felt stupid for even asking. I wish I'd trusted my gut back then. This was the calm before the storm, and I had no idea my life was about to implode. A few weeks after I started noticing Sarah's odd behavior, she told me she had a late dinner meeting with a client. It wasn't unusual. Her job often kept her out late, but something about the way she said it didn't sit right. She avoided eye contact, and her tone felt off. She left around 7 p.m. I remember standing at the window, watching her walk to the curb, where an Uber was waiting. I couldn't see the driver clearly, but my gut told me it was him, Alex. Normally, I'd let it go, but that night something snapped inside me. I couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't where she said she'd be. I tried to convince myself I was overthinking it, but eventually I grabbed my keys and decided to go for a drive. I didn't have a plan. I just needed to get out. As I was driving, I spotted something that made my stomach drop. Sarah's unmistakable silhouette in the back of a parked car. I slowed down, trying to convince myself it wasn't her. But as I got closer, I saw her face illuminated by the glow of a phone screen. It was her, and she wasn't alone. The windows were fogged up, but I could see enough to know exactly what was happening. Her head was tilted back, and she was laughing at something her driver was saying. Then they started kissing. I froze. My heart was pounding so hard I thought I might pass out. My wife, the woman I had vowed to spend my life with, was making out with another man in a car. I didn't even realize I was gripping the steering wheel so hard until my knuckles turned white. I didn't want to believe what I was seeing, but before I could process it, things escalated. They moved into the back seat. Clothes started coming off. It didn't take a genius to figure out what was happening. I was in shock, but anger quickly took over. I parked my car and marched up to theirs. I didn't have a plan. My emotions were in overdrive. But I knew I couldn't just sit there and let this happen. I yanked the car door open, and there they were, half-dressed and tangled together. Sarah screamed, covering herself with her coat. Alex just sat there, wide-eyed, like a deer in headlights. "What the fuck is this?" I yelled. My voice was shaking with rage. Sarah started screaming at me, as if I was the one in the wrong. "What are you doing here? Are you stalking me now?" "Stalking you?" I shouted back. "You're my wife, and you're fucking someone else in a goddamn car." She started crying, not out of guilt, but out of anger. "You're so fucking controlling, always watching me. This is why I can't stand being around you anymore." Her words hit me like a truck. Here she was caught in the act, and somehow she was twisting it around to make me the villain. I turned to Alex. "You knew she was married, didn't you?" He stammered. I didn't know it was like this." "Bullshit," I snapped. "You've been driving her around for months? Don't act like you didn't know." Sarah kept yelling, accusing me of ruining her life, invading her privacy, and not giving her space. It was like she couldn't even grasp the gravity of what she'd done, or maybe she just didn't care. I didn't say another word. I just walked back to my car and drove home. My hands were shaking the entire way. When she got back later that night, she acted like nothing had happened. She tried to spin the situation, saying it was just a mistake and that I blew it out of proportion. She claimed they hadn't even had sex, but I knew what I saw. I told her I wanted a divorce. Her response? She laughed. "You're so dramatic," she said. "You're really going to throw everything away over one little mistake?" I didn't answer. I went to bed and locked the door. After that night, I was resolute. I wanted a divorce. There was no coming back from what I saw. No way to rebuild trust after that kind of betrayal. But Sarah? She didn't take me seriously. The morning after I caught her, she waltzed into the kitchen as if nothing had happened. I was sitting at the table with a cup of coffee, trying to make sense of everything, when she sat across from me and said, "So, have you calmed down yet?" I looked at her in disbelief. "Calm down? You cheated on me, Sarah, with a taxi driver, in his car." She rolled her eyes. "God, you're so melodramatic. It was just a stupid fling, okay? It's not like I love him or anything." Her nonchalance made my blood boil. "That doesn't make it better." I snapped. "Do you even care about what you've done to me? To us?" She shrugged. "Honestly, you've been so boring lately. All you do is work and come home to sit on the couch." I needed some excitement. Alex made me feel alive. Her words were like a punch to the gut. I couldn't believe how cruel she was being. "I'm filing for divorce," I said firmly. "I'm done with this." That's when she lost it. Her calm, dismissive demeanor vanished, replaced by full-blown hysteria. She started screaming about how I was overreacting, how I couldn't just throw away 6 years of marriage, and how I'd never find anyone better than her. "You think you're so perfect," she shouted. "You're just some dull office drone who can't even make me happy." I didn't respond. I couldn't. Her words hurt, but they also confirmed that I was making the right decision. I grabbed my coat and left the house to clear my head. When I came back a few hours later, I found Sarah in the living room, pacing back and forth. She must have been stewing the whole time, because the moment I walked in, she unleashed a new wave of accusations. "You're probably seeing someone else, aren't you?" she spat. "That's why you're so eager to leave, because you've got some little office slut on the side." Her hypocrisy was mind-blowing. "Are you serious right now? You're the one who cheated, Sarah, not me." She smirked. "Yeah, well, maybe if you'd been a better husband, I wouldn't have had to." That was it. I told her to pack her things and leave. She refused, claiming that she had just as much right to the house as I did. I couldn't believe it. She cheats on me, and now she's acting like she's the victim? The next few days were hell. Sarah alternated between screaming at me, trying to guilt-trip me, and pretending everything was fine. One moment she'd be sobbing, begging me to forgive her, and the next she'd be cursing me out, calling me every name in the book. At one point, she even tried to turn it into a joke. "Come on, babe. It's not like I was planning to run off with Alex. He's just a phase. You know I love you." I didn't say anything. I just started gathering evidence for the divorce. Texts, photos, everything I could get my hands on. Then, just when I thought things couldn't get worse, Alex showed up at our house. About 3 days after I told Sarah I wanted a divorce, Alex, the taxi driver, decided to make his grand entrance into the chaos. It was around 8 p.m., and I was in the living room going through some paperwork for the lawyer when I heard a loud knock at the door. When I opened it, there he was, Alex, early 30s, scruffy beard, wearing a cheap leather jacket like he thought he was in some kind of rom-com. "Can I help you?" I asked, keeping my tone as neutral as possible. He glanced behind me, clearly looking for Sarah. Yeah. I'm here to see Sarah. I felt my blood pressure spike. She's not available. And even if she was, you've got no business being here. Alex scratched the back of his neck, looking awkward but still trying to stand his ground. Look, man, I just want to talk to her. We got stuff to figure out. Stuff to figure out? I repeated, laughing bitterly. You mean like how you both destroyed my marriage? There's nothing to figure out, Alex. Go back to your car and drive away. Before he could say anything else, Sarah appeared in the hallway. She must have been eavesdropping because she was already shouting before she even reached us. Why are you here, Alex? She yelled, pushing past me to stand in the doorway. He looked genuinely confused. You weren't answering my texts. I thought we were going to talk about what's next. What's next? I cut in, unable to stay quiet. What the hell does that mean, Sarah? She turned to me with that infuriating smirk I was beginning to hate. Oh, relax. He's just being dramatic. There's nothing going on anymore. Alex's expression said otherwise. He looked hurt, almost betrayed. Is that what you told him? That it was nothing? After everything we talked about? At that moment, I realized something Sarah hadn't bothered to mention. This wasn't just a fling for Alex. He thought they had a future together. I crossed my arms and leaned against the doorframe. This is rich. Go ahead, Alex. Why don't you tell me everything you and my wife have been talking about? Sarah panicked. She tried to shut the door in his face, but I blocked it. Alex, to his credit, hesitated for a second before spilling the truth. She said she was unhappy. He started, looking directly at me. She told me you were controlling and boring, that she felt trapped in this marriage. She said she wanted out, that she was thinking about moving in with me once she figured out how to leave you. My stomach churned. I glanced at Sarah, who was glaring at Alex like she wanted to strangle him. That's bullshit, she snapped. I never said that, Alex. You're twisting things. He shook his head, looking genuinely hurt. I can't believe you're lying right now. After everything we've been through, you're just going to throw me under the bus. Sarah turned on me, her voice shrill. Don't listen to him. He's just trying to mess with us because I told him it was over. I had enough. I stepped aside and gestured for Alex to leave. Get out of here, both of you. I don't care what lies you've told each other. I'm done. Alex looked like he wanted to say more, but thought better of it. He muttered something under his breath and walked back to his car. Sarah, of course, stayed behind and started berating me. This is all your fault, you know, she hissed. If you weren't such a boring, insecure asshole, none of this would have happened. I couldn't even muster anger anymore. I just looked at her and said, Pack your things, Sarah. I'm done with this circus. Her response? She laughed in my face. Oh, you think you're kicking me out? Good luck with that, sweetheart. This is my house, too. And just like that, I realized this wasn't going to be as simple as filing some papers and moving on. Sarah wasn't just a cheater. She was a fighter. And she was ready to make this as ugly as possible. After that night, Sarah started weaponizing every aspect of our shared life to make my existence miserable. She refused to leave the house, claiming she had just as much right to be here as I did. Every conversation turned into a screaming match. I'm not going anywhere, she declared one night, arms crossed as she stood in the doorway to the bedroom. If you want to leave so badly, you can go. But I'm the one paying the mortgage, I shot back. And I've been cleaning this house for years, so it's basically mine too, she yelled. Besides, you'd never survive on your own. The gaslighting and manipulation were nonstop. One day, she'd cry and beg for forgiveness, saying she made a mistake and wanted to work things out. The next day, she'd accuse me of being too cold and say I drove her to cheat. It was like living with two different people, and both of them were toxic. The worst part? She started parading Alex in front of me. It started with little things. I'd come home from work to find her on the phone, laughing loudly. She'd glance at me, smirk, and say, "Oh, Alex, you're too funny," before walking into another room. Once, I caught her sitting in the driveway in his car, leaning in close to him like they were teenagers. I confronted her about it. You have no respect for me, do you? You're still seeing him, even after everything. She shrugged. What I do in my personal time is none of your business. We're getting divorced, remember? But you're still living here. I snapped. Do you have any shame at all? She just laughed and walked away. Then, one day, I came home early from work to find Alex inside the house, sitting on my couch, drinking my beer. Are you kidding me right now? I asked, slamming the door behind me. Sarah appeared from the kitchen, completely unbothered. What's your problem? He's just visiting. Visiting? You brought your boyfriend into my house. Alex tried to play it cool. Look, man, I don't want any trouble. You're in my house. I interrupted, pointing at the door. Get out. Now. Sarah rolled her eyes. Oh, relax. He's not staying the night or anything. I was done. I called the cops. I explained that Alex was trespassing and that Sarah had no right to invite him over since we were still legally married and the house was in my name. The officers were polite, but ultimately said they couldn't do much without a court order. You should file for a formal eviction if she refuses to leave, one of them suggested. That was the last straw. The next day, I met with my lawyer and filed the paperwork. Sarah was officially served with divorce papers a week later. Her reaction? Explosive. You think you're so clever, don't you? She screamed, tearing up the papers right in front of me. You're not going to win this. I'll take you for everything you have. She made good on her threat, too. Sarah filed a counterclaim, demanding alimony, half of the house, and even a portion of my retirement savings. She knew exactly how to hit where it hurt. To make matters worse, she started spreading rumors about me to our mutual friends and co-workers. Suddenly, I was the abusive husband who neglected his wife and forced her into another man's arms. I'm just telling my side of the story, she told me smugly when I confronted her. At this point, I was completely drained, emotionally, financially, and mentally. But I wasn't going to let her win. After being served with the divorce papers, Sarah went nuclear. She wasn't just fighting to stay in the house or demanding alimony. She wanted revenge. The fake domestic violence accusation. It started with a knock at the door late one evening. When I opened it, 2 police officers were standing there. Are you my name? One of them asked. Yes, I replied, confused. We've received a report of domestic violence at this address. We need to ask you a few questions. My heart sank. What? No, there's been no violence here. Sarah appeared behind me, fake tears streaming down her face. He's lying, she sobbed, clutching her arm like it was injured. He grabbed me during an argument earlier and wouldn't let me go. I was speechless. She was straight up lying to the police, and she was good at it. Sir, we're going to need you to come with us while we investigate this further, one of the officers said. I didn't resist. I knew that arguing or getting defensive would only make me look worse. At the station, I calmly explained everything, including how Sarah and I were in the middle of a contentious divorce and how she had a history of manipulation. Thankfully, the officers seemed to believe me. There were no marks on Sarah, no evidence of any kind to back up her claims. After a few hours, they let me go, but the damage was done. Sarah was waiting for me when I got back home. Thought that might scare you a little, she said with a smirk. I couldn't believe how far she was willing to go just to make my life hell. The accidental property damage. A few days later, I came home to find my laptop smashed on the floor and a giant red wine stain on the couch. What the hell happened? I asked, looking around the living room in disbelief. Sarah, lounging on the undamaged part of the couch with her phone, barely glanced up. Oops. I tripped, she said flatly. You tripped onto my laptop and spilled an entire bottle of wine? She shrugged. Maybe if you didn't buy such cheap furniture, it wouldn't stain so easily. I knew she'd done it on purpose. It was just another way for her to retaliate, to make me feel powerless. But I kept my cool. I documented everything. Photos, notes, even timestamps. Alex makes a comeback. As if Sarah's antics weren't enough, Alex decided to reinsert himself into the drama. One night, I woke up to loud banging on the front door. Groggy and annoyed, I went to see what was going on. There he was, drunk out of his mind, yelling for Sarah. Sarah, baby, let me in. I miss you. I stepped outside, locking the door behind me. Get out of here, Alex. You're not welcome. He stumbled closer, his breath reeking of alcohol. She's my girl now, man. Why don't you just let her go? She's not my problem anymore, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. But she's not your problem either. Go home. He got belligerent, shoving me and shouting obscenities. I called the cops, and they took him away for public intoxication. When I went back inside, Sarah was waiting in the hallway, arms crossed. "Did you really have to call the police?" she snapped. "Are you serious?" He was drunk and banging on the door at 3 a.m. "Of course I called the police." She rolled her eyes. "You're so dramatic. No wonder I needed someone else." Finding a silver lining. At this point, I was exhausted. Sarah's lies, the false accusations, the property damage, Alex's drunken visit. It felt like I was trapped in a nightmare with no end in sight. But there was one silver lining: my lawyer. She was a bulldog, and she wasn't letting Sarah get away with any of this. The fake domestic violence claim? Dismissed in court. The demands for alimony? Denied, thanks to the evidence I'd collected showing Sarah's affair. We were making progress, but it wasn't over yet. After her failed attempts to paint me as the villain, Sarah decided she needed to prove she was thriving. She announced one morning, completely unprompted, that she was starting her own business. "I'm going to be an influencer," she declared, sipping coffee at the kitchen counter like she was pitching to investors. I couldn't help but laugh. An influencer? Doing what? Lifestyle stuff. Fitness, beauty tips, travel, she said, flicking her hair like she was already famous. It sounded ridiculous, but I didn't argue. I figured if she was busy chasing clout, she'd have less time to ruin my life. But, of course, Sarah being Sarah, her new hobby quickly turned into another weapon. She started live streaming constantly, turning our shared house into her personal studio. One day, I came home to find her filming a video in the living room, complete with ring lights and obnoxiously loud music. "Can you keep it down?" I asked, trying to squeeze past the camera setup. She turned to the camera, fake laughter in her voice. "Oh, don't mind him, guys. That's just my boring, soon-to-be ex-husband. Say hi." The chat on her live stream exploded with comments like, "What a loser," and "Girl, you can do better." She ate it up, smirking as she read them aloud. I gritted my teeth and went to my room, but it didn't stop there. She started dragging me into her content, spinning lies about how toxic and controlling I was. My phone blew up with messages from friends and co-workers who'd seen her videos. "Dude, is Sarah okay? She's talking about you online. Man, you need to shut that down. She's making you look bad." It was humiliating, but I knew reacting publicly would only feed into her narrative. The accidental meeting. A week later, Sarah dropped another bombshell. She was hosting a dinner party at the house. "For who?" I asked, already dreading the answer. "Oh, just some friends," she said vaguely. "Don't worry, you're not invited." I decided to go out that night to avoid the awkwardness. But when I came home later, I realized Sarah's friends included Alex. I walked into the kitchen to grab a glass of water, only to find Alex sitting at the table with Sarah and a few of her influencer colleagues. They were laughing like old pals, and the tension in the room was palpable. "Oh, look who decided to join us," Sarah said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Alex gave me a half-smile, clearly enjoying the situation. "Hey, man, no hard feelings, right?" I ignored him, grabbed my water, and left. I wasn't going to let them bait me into a scene, but inside I was furious. The breaking point. The final straw came when Sarah crossed a line I never thought she'd dare touch. One morning, I woke up to find my car vandalized in the driveway. Cheater's husband was spray-painted across the hood, and the tires were slashed. I stormed back into the house. "What the hell, Sarah? Did you do this?" She looked genuinely shocked, for once, not in a smug way. "What are you talking about?" I dragged her outside to see the damage, but she denied any involvement. "Why would I do that? I don't even care about your stupid car." "Then who did?" I snapped. She hesitated for a moment before muttering, "Probably one of Alex's friends. He might have mentioned something about you being a problem." My jaw dropped. "You're letting your boyfriend's friends come after me now?" She shrugged. "Not my fault you're so unlikable." That was it. I called the police and filed a report, making sure to mention Alex's possible involvement. I also told my lawyer, who assured me this would only strengthen my case.